So, good afternoon, good evening, good day, everyone. So, I am Bob Matthew Sunga. I am currently taking up MSDS 2020, MSDS in AIM, and currently would like to present to you the importance of data exploration and the data science life cycle. Usually, it is the PPDAC that I will be discussing and reconnecting it to how are we going to solve the problem. But first, of course, before we go deep dive or not really deep dive, actually it's more scratching the surface on the PPDAC. I'll have another video for the deep dive of PPDAC. I would like to first to ask you, how do you think, or what is the importance of having a data exploration at the beginning of what we are going to do, or whenever you handle data, you're supposed not to go to the to solve the problem, but rather explore it first. Okay, so today, this is actually what we call as a powerful spines or the backbone of data science framework or the life cycle itself, and use them to turn, messy reality into honest, useful decisions. Most of the time, data is not that arranged or clean. No, they are not usually useful at the very beginning. They're quite messy. No, especially if we're going to get them from public sources, we need to arrange them, we need to make sense of them first. And PPDAC is a framework in which everyone should be able to use, because this is a very important framework. So we'll start with a real world story where statistics expose what intuition missed, no? And then we have some demo on a calmer by towards the end of this session, so that we'll have a what they call this, a more calmer ending. All right, so without further ado, let's go and have our discussion. So the numbers have no way of speaking for themselves. We speak for them, we imbue them with meaning. Okay? It's actually by Knight Silver, by in his book The Signal Noise. So I'll be shifting from Tagalog to English, so that some of the we're not gonna we can um, we can make sense of the things that we are going to do. Of course, we would like to be more inclusive sa mga audiences natin na nakikinig dyan, especially mga students, no, alike, and also are trying to um, you know, uh, mas there are people who would like to be more at home in a sense in terms of the language. But do not worry. I believe that there is a way for us to translate everything else in English. All right. So when we say that numbers have no way of speaking this, it's actually contradictory to what we know or what we have grown up. No, so in the mainstream media, they will tell us that let the data speak for themselves or let the numbers speak for themselves. Actually, that is quite false, because there is no way for data to present itself unless it is presented in such a way that it serves, the narrative of the presenter. Okay, that is why we speak for them. Okay? When we say we speak for them, it means that we should be responsible in how we present this data. There are a lot of times that, especially in the presentation of a lot of things in the government or in private medias or in private sectors, that they will they will show us statistics like 10 out of 9 out of 10 people agree to this, or things like that, no. And most of the times mali yung nakikita natin. And it doesn't make sense, right? But to them, no, to them it makes sense because they're the ones who studying it, or they're the ones who making um what they call this, meaning for them, no. Data or the numbers itself, we imbue them with meaning. It is the presenter's way of thought, no. It is the presenter's um, skills that determines whether a data or a set of data or a set of numbers makes sense or not. Right? So there are a lot of examples. Later on, I'll present some examples that doesn't make sense. But let's first go to how do we really try to solve these problems. Okay. So our story for today is about a doctor, the data and the denominator. So I think most of you have heard about the story of Harold Shipman, maybe in some podcasts, but it doesn't emphasize much on how statistics was how or has played a major role in uncovering such a secret or such crime that happened. So Harold Shipman is actually a doctor, and as we go on, we'll be meeting him in a sense, okay, in terms of the things that he has done. All right, so I hope um, there are some disturbing facts here. So if you do not like those kinds of things and very graphic things, you may actually skip through this and go to the examples that we're going to be doing in a while. But I would encourage those who would like to dive into this to, really know the story of this person. Okay? So it was an ordinary morning on March 24, 1998, in South Manchester. Okay? The deaths came softly, like lights winking out of the long corridor. Nothing to see, nothing to fear. Into the streets were quiet. The sun was shining. Inside the coroner's office sat John Pollard, Her Majesty's coroner for Great Manchester South. Right, as always, he worked through his routine, sorting papers, signing documents, and bearing the weight of his daily duty. So John Pollard is one of the main proponent on how it has been discovered, and he's an officer. Okay, so but on that morning, so morning ng March 24, a letter crossed his desk. So pinadala ni Dr. Linda Reynolds of the Brook practice, no, nagpadala siya ng letter to the surgery, no, just across the street from another well-known doctor in Hyde. So meron siyang letter of concern na pinadala niya kay John Pollard. So in her words lay her alarm. No? An unusual number of patients dying, most of them elderly women, and almost all followed cremation. So nakakatakot daw, sabi niya doon sa letter, is that doon sa isang surgery across sa kanya, no, napapansin niya na may mga masyadong maraming namamatay. No? And at nearly every deathbed, the same doctor was present. So may nakita siyang pattern, may napansin siya. Maraming namamatay, madalas madandang babae, and then pinapakremate, no? And well, during that time, no, hindi pa masyadong uso ang cremation sa West, no? As far as I know. And it was only done for those with infectious disease, no? Especially in London or in Manchester. Okay. So at first, it might have been dismissed as a coincidence, no? A strange twist of fate. Siguro nangyari lang daw, but may mga iba pa rin nakakita, no? Yung iba na pansin din nila yung pattern na yun. So yung undertaker na si Deborah Bamroth, um, sepulturero, tama ba ang sabihin ng undertaker, spoke of the frequency and the sameness of the case. So may iba pa rin tao nakapansin. Masyadong madami at saka masyadong consistent yung nagaganap na namamatay na pattern, no? Babae, matandang babae. Tapos, followed by a cremation. Tapos may doktor. Yung doktor laging nandoon sa pag namamatay, no? It's becoming hindi na para siyang chance, no? So, and as the data began to be examined, the picture sharpened. So, over the span of 2 decades, more than 200 people was recorded dead under his care. So, itong doctor na to, no? This particular doctor. And the death often occurred in the afternoon hours as if may schedule yung pagkamatay ng mga tao. So, nung pinlot nila yung time of death, no, parang lahat nangyayari ng afternoon. No? And then compared with his peers, he was far more frequently present at the exact moment of death. So, paano nila nasabing consistent yun. Kasi may pinipirmahan na death certificate kung sino yung doctor na nag-approve. And madalas siya yung pumipirma doon. No? Each date, each name, each cremation form become another piece of the puzzle until the numbers began to whisper. Ratios that should have slept steered. The final plot sprouted at a spraying dot, then another, no? Tapos yung poison limits, later papaliwanag natin yun, no? It shivered. Yun yung nangyayari. No? Until na-collect nila, no? Audit logs, no? Yung mga certificates, wala naman daw binanggit, no? Na kahit na ano. But rather, when the investigators see yung statistics, something is not quite right. Diba? And when the puzzle was finally complete, it revealed not a healer, not a trusted family doctor, but a man who concealed a deadly secret for more than 20 years. It was Harold Shipman, a serial killer, a doctor, no, who was arrested in September 1998. Okay? He is a British practitioner who became one of the modern history's most prolific serial killer. He was arrested in September 1998 after he forged the will of the patient Kathleen Gundy triggered an inquiry. So, nung nahuli siya na fino-forge niya yung will or final or last will and testament ni Kathleen Grundy, no, it began to connect the dots. No, ito yung parang naging ano niya, trigger to be investigated. No, it showed that he had backdated records and exhumations revealed lethal diamorphine levels. So, nilalason niya by diamorphine yung mga pasyente niya. Okay. And on January 31, 2000, a jury convicted him of 15 murders and forgery. He received a whole life sentence. And the subsequent Shipman inquiry, if you're going to be deep diving in the case of Harold Shipman, there is a document known as the Shipman inquiry by James Janet Smith. He concluded that he have at least killed 215 patients with no further 45 suspected more. Okay, prompting reforms in death certification and clinical monitoring. So nagkaroon ng mga changes kasi nga yung system nila is flawed and Shipman ginamit niya yon, tinik advantage siya yung flaw na yon. Okay, he took his own life at the prison in January 13, 2004. No? Why does this case matter for data work? Of course, in statistics or in data science, no, we use statistical tools to apply, no, or to we use statistical tools to make sense of what we are handling. Of course, no, madami siya, and most of the time, uh, even with those statistical tools na ano natin siya, na-skip natin siya. No? Likely flag anomalies in years later, illustrating how PPDAC style planning and surveillance can turn numbers into timely investigative signals through a never, though it should never vertic on their own. Okay, so sa yung PPDAC, it actually help, no, do a framework or to inquire of what is really happening. The PPDAC framework or style of planning and surveillance, no, can turn numbers into timely investigative signals. So, nagiging important to as they go on. Especially, ito yung isa sa mga famous cases na na-solve ng PPDAC. So, may mga tanong tayo, no? So, what triggered the investigation? So, were there unusual deaths happening? Paano nila nalaman? And were there patterns? At anong klaseng mga tao yung pinatay ni Harold Shipman? And kailan sila namatay? No? So, meron lang tayong derived data set here based on the Shipman inquiry. So, these are the list of the names of the people that under his victim. Parang ito yung listahan lang siya, ginawa lang siya. But this is a good practice for all of you to check, no. Um, we will be sharing some of the data sets so that you can do some practice later on. Okay, so if this is the data set, actually, if you're gonna be looking at it, it's just a table of people, no. In itself, hindi natin siya masyadong madiderive or wala tayong masyadong makukuhang information on this. But once you graph it, we can see that something really is going on. No, we can see that here, no, there are the age of the women and the age of all age of men. Okay, we can see that in its frequency, no, makita natin na mas marami siyang tinarget na women. And in the Shipman inquiry, in some of the documentaries as well, sinabi that inevitable na ganito yung mangyayari because Harold Shipman was an old guy. You know, an old guy who is very nice, very demeanor, um, very siya, mapagbate siya sa mga tao. He's a good doctor neighbor, at least on what they have said in the documentaries. And you'll never suspect him kasi he smiles. He asks, "How are you doing?" No, and a doctor with that kind of attitude really is mabenta siya sa mga old women na in that time mag-isa lang namumuhay, no, sa mga bahay nila, just a maid, no, they just have a maid or a katulong or not kasambahay, no, and they really are lonely, no, and he took advantage of that. Of course, he has some men who are also under his care that died, but the pattern strikes that they most of the people that he has victimized are old women, and it shows, no. So ano ba yung PPDAC framework? Okay, the PPDAC was formulated and popularized by Chris Wilde and Maxine Fakaj of University of Auckland, no, as a model of the statistical inquiry. So PPDAC stands for problem, plan, data, analysis, and conclusion. So ano ibig sabihin nun? In their paper, the statistical thinking in empirical inquiry tells us that this is a good model or an iterative model in whenever we are trying to use data or to solve data or to solve a problem with data, right? So you need to understand first what is the requirements. Now in business, now you need to know what the business is. In investigation, you need to know what you're trying to find out. Okay? In other things, now you need to understand what is required in general. Okay? So next is the planning method in which ano ba yung magagawin natin? No, ano ba yung method ng mga i-consider natin? What are the metrics that we are gonna be doing or consider? And what are the error thresholds that we will be putting in? And what are the ethical questions? Or is there a need to anonymize things? Is there a need to redact it? Or things like that. Okay? So ano pa yung mga next is the data. No? Saan natin kukunin yung data or where do we get the data? What are the quality to check those data? How do we clean it? No? Are there definitions, derivations, fields to consider? Baka yung data mo 1,000 yung column, kailangan mo lang pala 5, no? Or you're trying to find out the energy versus the GDP correlation on different nations in different years, pero ang dami mong kinuhang iba-ibang data. So, you need to know, okay? You need to know which data you're going to be using. No? And ano may analysis, no? Next is the analysis. So, how do we analyze the data? Are we going to be using descriptive analytics? Are we going to be inferring from it? Are we going to use classification, regression, whatever, right? So, those are the things that we will consider in part of the analysis. And then, using those information that we're going to be garnering using in the analysis part, we're going to conclude them, check them if they are answering the problem. Of course, as you can see, no, meron siya mga pabalik-balik na mga arrow. It means that there will be time that after you understood the problem, and when you put it on a plan, something came up or something important you see, no, that you need to consider, no. So you put again in the problem, or while you're exploring the data, you saw something interesting. So try it, check, no, if it can be a problem or it can be part of the planning. Okay, so it's an iterative method. Um, the most important thing is that you understand what are the requirements, no, how you're gonna be planning, the data that you're gonna be garnering, and then the analysis that you're gonna do, and then the conclusion. Okay, so this is just a framework, a guide. It's not a strict process, no, that you need to follow. So it was adopted. The PPDAC framework was adopted in New Zealand education as the statistical inquiry cycle, no, in the national curriculum. That is why New Zealand, no, New Zealand is one of the best in terms of statistics. No, this is being um, discussed when it comes to statistical inquiries. Now, in terms of the Harold Shipman case, what are we going to be trying to do? So in the problem, no, we're trying to know, is the mortality in this practice abnormally high given the patient mix and time. So they would like to know kung talaga bang killer si Harold Shipman. Kasi bukod dito, of course, he's a doctor. And when you're a doctor, of course, there is mortality in your hands. May mga talagang namamatay sa mga doctor's hands, no? Pero it doesn't mean na pinatay nila yon. No, there are times na talagang ganun talaga yung nangyari. He's just an attending doctor, and it just happened that he's the one treating them. 'Di ba? So, hindi naman pwedeng namatay siya sa tabi, nakita doon. Ay, siya yung pumatay. Hindi naman ganun. He's a doctor. He should have, it is expected for them to save lives. And, of course, in saving lives, there are times that you are not really successful. 'Di ba? So, pero, with that in mind, hindi naman ibig sabihin nun, absuelto na sila. 'Di ba? Is it abnormally high? Ibig sabihin, baka naman sobrang daming namamatay talaga sa kanya. Meron siyang ginagawa. No? And then, let's plan ano yung mga kukunin natin. Of course, the age and sex standardization and expected deaths. No? Yung Poisson funnel plots, although we're going to be using the Poisson limits, the cumulative sum, and of course, yung mga audit trails. Yung mga magbibigay ng, what we call this, yung mga bibigay ng ng katibayan sa mga in-investigate nila. Next is the data. So, ano ba yung mga data na kukunin natin? So, first, you have the registered patients, the deaths for year mortality, no, demographics, cause of death, mga logs, no, all of this will be collected as part of the evidence gathering, right? Next is, of course, the analysis. Ano yung mga titignan nating analysis natin? Mga steps that we're gonna be doing, right? So, um, may mga outliers ba? May mga mass mortality ba? May spike ba talaga? So, these things, of course, we're going to check using all of it, okay? So, next is conclusion. Of course, as we do analysis, or as we analyze things, of course, we're going to be doing is that, let's see if we can answer the problem. Okay, so let's see. No, so next slide is um, this is what we call a scatter plot. No, there is a famous scatter plot in terms of the Harold Shipman inquiry. Yung meron pa siyang mga bar graphs, but I removed them so that we can focus on one muna. So this is the victim scatter plot. If you're gonna be observing it, no, so the y-axis refers to the age, the x-axis refers to the year of death, and then the colors refer to, the blue is the male, the orange will be the women. Okay. Now, if you're gonna be looking at it, no, you're gonna see that there is what we call a clumping or clustering of data. No? So we can see that there is much, much, much greater orange at the beginning of 1990 and towards the beginning of 2000. Okay, the range here, when we looking at this, the range, no, the date range between 1990 and 2000. No, if we're gonna look at it, there is much greater concentration of women that died at the age of 50 above, or we can say 60 and above, right? 60 and 90. We're gonna look at this square, 90 and 2000. There is much concentration. However, if we're gonna be looking at it as well, no, between 1985 to 1990, these 5 years of range also has a great concentration of women and even men dying at the hands of Harold Shipman. No? But not all of these deaths are actually, cor- um, maybe some of it, no, are accidental or circumstantial. But with this kind of plotting, we can see that there really must be happening because it's really abnormal. But how do we say it is abnormal? Now we need to further investigate. Okay, so the places of death mostly happen at their own home. In which 169 women died at their own home. In total of 204. And Harold Shipman is known to be a household doctor. He visits people. No, he visits his uh, he visits his people. He visits the patients. No, here at their own home. Kasi nga, he's a community doctor. Now, if we're gonna be looking at it further, this is the count of death or the expected death count per year. So, pag sinabi natin expected death, these are the uh, normally ganito kadami yung namamatay, most probably. No, ito yung parang tinataya ng mga statistician that most probably there is 26 people who will die at least in their practice. 'Di ba? Per year, no? And per tao yan, per tao, per doctor. Now, no, per year pala, sorry, yeah. It's per year. Now, if we're gonna be looking at the observed death during per year, no, and put them side by side, no, wala masyado tayong makikita. Parang it doesn't mean too much. But if we put them together, we're going to see that from 1975 up to 1998, there is a consistent death that is above the expected death. Usually kapag expected death at saka observed death, no, pag pinagsama natin siya, dapat nag-criss-cross siya. Kasi ito usually expected death is the mean eh. No, usually it's the mean. Most probably, yan yung mangyayari. So, dapat to nag-criss-cross. Or, kung hindi man siya mag-criss-cross, it should be have some, um, dapat meron siya mga downward na intersections here somewhere. But for this time, there is a consistency of everything is high. No? And then there's a spike. We're gonna be looking at it between 1990 to 1994. No? Nagkaroon ng mga spikes. No? 1993 to be exact. Yan. And 1994. Hindi na siya bumaba from there. So, that really is abnormal. Now, what is the standard na tinitingnan natin? Now, the Poisson limit death count tells us that hanggang dito, mula doon sa expected death, hanggang doon sa Poisson limit, it will be considered normal. Okay, it will be considered normal. Ibig sabihin, wala pa siya nangyari. Parang ito lang yung bantay. But if we're gonna be looking at it, it's too far. Diba? It's too far from each other. So, yung mga deaths na nangyari, na hindi nag-cross, or na hindi siya nag-cross sa Poisson limit, is nakalusot. Nakalusot siya sa trigger alarm, kumbaga. Pero, during 1992, which is lumagpas na siya, diba? Yan, dito na nagsimula yung pagsususpecha ng mga tao. Kasi, masyado na madami, no? 50 lang, pero yung observed death mo is 50, ay yung poison limit mo is 48, nag-50 ka, so sobra ka ng dalawang tao, no? And then you are far too far from the expected deaths, which is 32, correct? So, may nangyayari talaga. No? Something really is happening. Okay? Now, let's move forward. No? Let's move forward. Yan. Ito yung plotted na death count ng mga namatay kay Harold Shipman. If we're gonna look at it, wala na masyado nangyari except for the 1994 and 1995, 1996, 1998. Ito lang yung parang significant. Pero if you're gonna, wala tayong reference, oh, well, what happened, di ba? Ano papatunayan yan? No? So, let's add another one. So, the excess death is the death difference between the expected death and the observed death. That is what we call excess death. Now, if we're gonna look at the excess death, there is seemingly a pattern happening, di ba? Look at the first few years, no? Dito nag-touch na siya, no? And then, if we're gonna look at 1982 to 1984, no? Both the activity of the death numbers of Harold Shipman and the excess death increase. Diba? If we're gonna look at it, it also increased. Nagkaroon na ng decrease dito sa part na to, no? Pero, as it increases as well, no, nag-increase din yung mga excess death. Ibig sabihin, may nangyayari, di ba? And look at the Poisson limit. Pag inad natin yung individual Poisson limit. Yan. Makita natin na talagang may nangyayari. Kasi tignan mo, lagpas-lagpas na talaga siya. So, this actually added to the fire, no? And if we're gonna look at them all together, it's not that easy to dismiss that the attribution of the number of deaths or the difference between the observed death and the expected death can be attributed to the activities of Harold Shipman. Of course, as an investigator, syempre, you would like to know more, di ba? Baka naman nagkataon lang to kasi even with this kind of evidence, no, or this kind of inquiry, hindi man siya evidence, but inquiry, baka naman may fluke lang, di ba? But, the cumulative excess death, if we're gonna put it like in a cumulative way, meaning it adds up every year, di ba? And then Harold Shipman's cumulative count of victims actually has the same trend. It both increases. If Harold Shipman was innocent, it should be fluctuating or at least going downward as well, and it will not have the same trend as the excess death. That is why they put in the Harold Shipman inquiry. No? The analysis is that multiple mid-late 90s breach the exec Poisson upper cumulative limit. The cumulative sum rises steadily and crosses a reasonable threshold well before 1998, indicating that there is a sustained, meaning talagang may ginagawa to sustain excess mortality, not a single year blip. And in the time of day and day of week, ito hindi natin ito wala kasi tayo nakuha ang data, but in the Harold Shipman inquiry, the time of day and the day of the week clustering compares that it happened in a very concentrated and narrow window. It means that it happened to a certain range of days and a certain range of hours within the day, no? As if nakaschedule siya. And the agent sex and reweighting and removal of obvious high-risk sex subgroups do not erase the signal, even if they try to institutionalize the patients, no? It still doesn't erase this signal. It still is very consistent. No? And the numbers did not lie. It didn't lie. No? And taken together, the magnitude and the persistence and the patterning of excess death in Shipman's patient list are incompatible with random fluctuation. Hindi siya random talaga, no? Or possible case of mixed differences. Hindi siya nagkataon lang or hindi siya parang fluke lang. And the exact Poisson test identified that there is a multiple annual exceedances attributed the cumulative sum of a prolonged period of abnormal mortality that culminated in the 1990s. Therefore, in this framework, no, we can conclude that Shipman's practice exhibited a statistically extreme, sustained, and patterned elevation in deaths, no, that aligns with the non-statistical evidence of deliberate harm. And together with the statistics and of course the non-statistical facts, malamang yung mga ano yan, yung mga death certificates sa pinirmahan nila, no, the statistical case is not merely a significant but decisively so across multiple mutually reinforcing tests. So makita natin that with all of those, no, efforts and information and data exploration, no, statistics showed a story. It's true, no. The statistics guided, no, the investigators to convict Harold Shipman and reveal the true story of a serial killer hiding as a doctor. It's quite sad, a sad story for those who are victim. They become quote unquote statistics, no, in this matter, but it them as the victims, no, um, they were what they call this, uh, they were served justice. They got the justice that they deserve, no, because of them. And because of this, no, a lot of reforms happened. So let's go to a more, you know, a lighter way of doing it. So masyadong mabigat si Harold Shipman. No, but of course it's for you to know how important it is. So let's see the penguins data set. Okay. So using the PPDAC framework, let's try to know about the penguins data set. Okay. So what is the problem? Okay. Understand how penguins body size traits vary across species and islands and identify simple relationship, especially whether flipper leg is a good predictor of body mass. Okay, so ito yung problem natin with the penguins dataset. Okay? Next is that we need to plan. So, animal plans natin. We normalize column names, clean the dataset, no, by retaining rows, with complete values. Yung Coleman, ito yung beak, no, yung tuka nila. Length, Coleman mass, depth, flippers, and then the body mass in grams. Now, we had to summarize it by performing central tendencies, no, generating the central tendencies of the species, and per profiles. Now, we need to know also the visualization of the distribution. So, kayo bahala doon if you would like to know. Of course, I have an example here, but I would like you to, to check or to see kung ano yung mga kaya ninyong makita or that. Quantify the body mass. If you have flipper length, no, tignan nyo kung ano yung mga pwedeng itignan na relationship via person, correlation, and a simple OLS fit. Okay? Now, tignan din natin yung mga source files. I'll be uploading it. No, bibigyan ko kayo ng link so that you can, or you can look at the penguins dataset. I think this is available in Kaggle. No? Missingness, no, tignan nyo din. Check to clean, no, if there are like irregular entries or wrong entries or blank entries or zero entries. You look at it. Now, ano yung mga maging analysis natin? Of course, we need to analyze them. So, this is my analysis, no? The distribution of body mass per frequency. So, I can say that in this picture, we have a body mass between 3,500 to 4,000. Ang mean, no, ng body mass natin is about that type. Now, we also have checking if there are outliers, no? So ito siya, nakita natin dito sa chin strap species, merong dalawang outliers. So ibig sabihin you need to check on this data kasi nagpas na siya dito sa box plot natin. Okay, so later on, another discussion na lang, ano ba yung box plot? To check outliers. Okay? Now, you can also see that sample size per species, pinakamabigat or pinakamadami, no? Na nakuha natin is the Adelaide species. So, sila yung pinakamaraming population nito, followed by the Gen 2 and the chin strap species. Now, if we're gonna be looking at it in terms of the scatter plot, no, with different shapes as the circle as the Adelaide, square as the chin strap, and triangle as the Gen 2, now we can see or create a linear regression that the body mass versus the flipper length is a good indicator, no? So we can actually predict, no, at least to some extent, the flipper length. If we know the flipper length, we can see what the body mass is, or what the body mass with regards to the flipper length. Diba? Also, with that, we can also, if you're gonna look at this, no, makita natin that there is a high clustering between 210 to 230, no, we can use this to classify. So, halimbawa, lumabas na nandito banda ang plot mo, no, sa bandang dito, then we can also classify it as again two species. Diba? Pero dito banda, medyo madaming, what do you call this? Maraming confusion na mangyayari pa dito pagbaba, no, kasi meron tayong Adela and Chinstrap and they are quite mixed, no. Pero pagbaba, no, between 190 to 180 below, no, we can actually classify it as Adelaide na, diba? Pero after that, medyo meron mga mix-up na nangyayari, no. So yung clustering between the Adelaide and the Chinstrap is not that much what they call this, profound, no. Tingnan natin ngayon yung next, no. What if we choose a different parameter such as the Coleman depth and the Coleman length? So we can see that there is already a good division na nangyayari, no. May mga region na rin nangyayari na, okay, per species. So this is a very good application already. So, if you know the Coleman length and the Coleman depth, you can actually create some sort of a prediction application here. A classification application. So, nyari, 45 ang nakuha mo Coleman length, and then ang Coleman depth mo is nasa mga 14, at dito siya papatak, and then you're asked, ano classification ng species niyan? Siyempre, Gen 2, kasi maraming Gen 2 sa tabi niya. Diba? In this cluster. It's clustered within again two clusters. Same with kung makakuha ka ng 40 and then you get 18. So you can see that meron. Yan. Pakita natin that it is a Adelaide species. Okay, so tingnan natin yung analysis natin. So we have sample sizes, no? Counts per species, and then by species differences. See the box plot shows clear mass differences across species, being Gen 2 the heaviest on the average, and Adelaide being the lightest. In terms of the relationship, we can see that body mass versus flipper length is a strong positive association, meaning you can actually use one to predict the other. And we can see here, ito yung pwede natin gawin, then a flip line. So if you would like to do a prediction, no, yeah. Also, it's a good classifier, yung Bill Coleman length and depth, because they are visible. No, it is actually useful for classification. Okay. So, conclusion. Now, we can say that species differ systematically in body mass and flipper length. Okay. Flipper length is a strong predictor of body mass, and Bill metrics also separate species in nicely 2D space. Yeah. Okay. So, hindi lang for Harold Shipman to, this is also for other works as well. So, would like to know more of your analysis. You can post it here if you have some kind of a report. What are the things that you found out? If you found out something different, or we have the same findings or different, I would like to know. please, of course, you can comment it, no, and then for those who would like to have further discussions on certain topics in statistics, in data science, in data engineering, no, in machine learning. So I'll be posting as we go. Plan to have some kind of series or discussion on these kinds of topics, so embedding them with stories in history that will be very helpful for us to know further or deep down at least to further deep dive on those topics. Okay, if you would like to deep dive, in the case of Harold Shipman, of course, there is the Shipman inquiry and the Art of Statistics written by Spiegelhalter. All right, so I'll be seeing you next time. Thank you very much for listening in. Okay, so I'll be seeing you in the next story.